I'm Lloyd Edge. I'm the CEO of Aus Property Professionals Buyers Agency. Welcome aboard, and you're going to hear all about my journey from playing the trombone to buying some properties and helping people do the same thing along the way, and also some of the charity work that I'm doing.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and this is the number one place to get exclusive insights and solutions, and especially from the people that are living them. And we are going to be talking on how to solve your biggest financial and business puzzles. Now, Lloyd, how are you doing today?
Prosper, it's fantastic to be here today, and really lovely to see you again, and looking forward to having a good chat. I'm doing really well. The sun's out, can't be happier.
Absolutely. I'm all excited. But before we jump into what we're about to jump into, is there anything that you wanted to tell us before we got started?
Well, obviously, we're going to have a good chat about a number of different items through what I do and my journey and everything. And I guess just like to let people know that, firstly, I'm not a financial advisor. So anything regarding finances is just general conversation. And anything when it comes around to property or strategies or anything that we talk about is just general advice. And I'd recommend people to always consult their own specialists and advisors to get their own specific advice in accordance with what their own brief and their own actual criteria needs to be.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Lloyd, for that. Now that we've got all the legalese out of the way, for those that are watching right now, Lloyd Edge is an old friend and somebody who I have great respect for. Not only is he the CEO of Aus Property Professionals, he's a man who went from teaching music to building a multi-million-dollar empire. And yes, he's also the best-selling author behind Positively Geared and By Now, all the other books that we're going to be talking about. Now, as I've mentioned, Aus Property Professionals is one of Australia's most sought-after buyers advocacy agencies, and Lloyd Edge is the 2024 Real Estate Institute of New South Wales Buyers Agent of the Year. Now, Lloyd, I could go on and talk about things that I'm not even qualified to talk about. Congratulations on all the accolades and everything else that comes along with it.
Oh, well, thank you very much, but that's kind of embarrassed me a bit. I mean, we obviously keen to get into talking about the journey, and I guess where I've been, what I've done, and how I managed to help people. I guess that's probably the main thing, and probably the main thing that people like to hear from us.
Absolutely. We might as well jump into it. You started off as a music teacher. Tell us a little bit about what that looked like for you, and when you then decided, you know what, I think I'm going to have to put down the trombone and start picking up title deeds.
Well, it is quite a story when I look back on it, because my best subject at school was actually not music. It was actually economics. But I decided not to follow a finance or economics kind of journey at the time, and just went straight into studying music and went to the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, and I studied the trombone amongst other instruments, the euphonium, which is something that people probably haven't heard of very much, and also the piano. And following those studies, I spent a little bit of time playing professionally and doing a little bit of conducting and things, but basically got into teaching, which is something that I really enjoyed doing, teaching students from the young years, from sort of the primary school years right through to HSC years and adults and things as well. So that was something I did for a number of years, had some fantastic opportunities. When I did become sort of the head of bands in some of the schools I worked in, I did get the privilege to be able to take them on international music tours and things like that. So I had a great time from that perspective. Touring places like America and even Israel, which it's unfortunate what's happening there at the moment, but that's actually one of my favorite countries that I've ever ever been to and everything like that. So I had some great opportunities there. But one of the things that I did become aware of as I was teaching is the lack of financial security that you can actually build up as a teacher. And particularly when I first started off, when I wasn't on a salary and I was actually just getting paid per hour to teach the trombone or to conduct the band. And I couldn't see any real financial security in the future for that. So one thing that I did start to do, and this followed on, I mean, the first thing I did was, I saved up really hard and I bought myself a little apartment to live in as my first home. And I sort of lived there for 4 or 5 years. But I then started to realize that I really need to start to set myself up with something that would provide better financial security for the future than just relying on my income through music. So I started to buy some more properties. At the time, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just doing what I thought sounded good, buy properties in Sydney and hope they'd go up and everything like that. The first few properties I bought, I was probably lucky that most of them did go up because they were just in Sydney and Sydney's done well. But I also bought, the first property I bought was just after the 2000 Olympics. And the market had already boomed. So I was actually buying at the wrong time of the market at the time. So, once it had boomed and the market was coming back down, didn't really know what I was doing, didn't really have a strategy. But a few years later, when I decided to, really do some more research, attend a few seminars, speak to a few people, and then realize that I can diversify and start buying in some other markets. I started to look at buying in Queensland, in other areas and things that didn't have to all be close to home. And then for me, I was still in a position where I felt like I was getting into a lot of debt and not having much cash flow coming in. And I was thinking, like, where am I? I've got like 4 or 5 properties, and I still feel like I'm broke. But people who buying properties should actually be doing quite well. But I just had a lot of debt, not a lot of rental income because they were negatively geared. They were costing me more. It cost me a lot to own, essentially, more than what the rental income was. That's when I started to buy in those other markets that had more positive rental yields, but also looking at ways to add value to a property. And then one of the first things that I did when I went outside Sydney was to buy a block of land and then build a duplex on it. Now, I built a duplex and subdivided that to create some equity, essentially. Equity basically being the difference of what I paid for the property at the time, and then what the current market value of the property was on a new valuation. And I actually earned twice as much equity in that one property deal than what I was earning the whole year as a teacher. And that's where the light bulb sort of went off into my head, and the property bug really hit me. And I took that equity out, and I repeated the process, did another duplex, and then went and bought another property in Brisbane, and went from there, and then started to really set myself a goal that I can use property to create, a second source of income, and be able to retire from teaching. Because for me, I've been teaching for quite a bit of time, but I was also feeling a little bit tired, a little bit jaded, and didn't want to be doing that my whole career because I did believe that people can do sort of other things in a career. So I set myself some goals there, and I built up my portfolio and was quite strategic about it, and got to the point where the rental income that I was getting from my portfolio was actually more than what my salary for the whole year was in teaching. So I actually replaced my income, and that allowed me to retire from teaching. Now, what happened just before I was once I sort of planned to retire? It's like, well, what am I actually going to do? And had a few conversations, with my wife and stuff, and she said, well, what you really need to do is, start meeting people in coffee shops and talking to them about your journey and your properties and things. And I guess things initially started off by me writing some blogs, where I just putting some content out there. I wasn't monetizing it at the time. I was just passionate about property, putting some blogs out there. And it's a bit of a joke with my wife, Renee, and myself, because she'd be saying, well, if you write the blogs, then I don't need to listen to you talk about property all the time. So we're just putting that information out there. But it resulted in people, contacting me and asking for a bit of help. And I was also featured in a little bit of media, some of the property magazines, and then on some of the radio stations when they sort of heard that I'd done quite well in a particular property venture and things. And so I was in a fortunate position where I was having people come to ask me for some advice. But the unfortunate part of that position is that I was not qualified to do anything at the time because I was a music teacher, and not a real estate person, not a licensed real estate agent. So that's when the thought of developing a business where I could actually help people emulate what I'd actually done. So that's essentially what we got going, and I went and did a diploma of property services and a few other qualifications, and actually did that at the same time that I was still teaching. So sort of in my last couple of years of teaching, I was working all day, and then at night I was studying all night, doing my courses and stuff like that, so I could get licensed and things. So that's how the business essentially started. But I was in a fortunate position that I really had clients before I even had a website or anything like that, because I had people wanting to work with me, wanting to understand the strategies that I was using to get to where I'd got to.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking us through that journey, Lloyd. And, you mentioned that you started off having studied economics, but then you then chose music as the outlet or the way to go. Now, so many people would really be focused on the thing that they studied and obviously not follow it through as a career. Did you ever feel any regret for not having followed the economics side of things?
No, I wouldn't say I've got any regret. I do sometimes think, well, I wonder what would have happened if I'd sort of done that back in the early days. So my wife, she's a musician as well, but however, she didn't just she actually was accepted into the conservatorium. This is long before I met her, but she decided not to follow music. She went and did a Bachelor of Economics. And she became a chartered accountant and things like that. So that could have been a path I may have taken, but I probably may have ended up working in some of the big accounting firms and doing something different to what I'm doing now, or it might have led back to what I'm doing now, perhaps. But yeah, no regrets, because music was a big passion for me at the time, and something that I probably felt I was quite good at. Whether I was or not might be a different story, but that was certainly a passion, and certainly my parents encouraged me to go and study music. So yeah, certainly no regrets that I didn't do that at the time. But certainly, for me, I've always sort of understood numbers, and when I look at numbers in property and things related to finances and rental yields and all those kind of things, they come to me quite easily, and that was kind of always the case. So it seemed to me quite natural that at some point I'd move on and do something related to that, not sort of be a music teacher my whole life.
Absolutely. And obviously with the way and what you are now doing, property is all about demand and supply, and some of the attributes that economics actually, has as fundamentals. So you haven't really veered that much further from that. Now, when you went on and purchased your first property, for so many people, that's usually a really big purchase, and it's usually the last sort of purchase that they made. And from what you're saying, you started off by making a mistake, buying in a market that was already gone past its prime. What was the sentiment around at that time when you went in to buy? Because there would have been people around you that were either telling you yay or nay and things of that nature. The reason why I'm asking this is so many people have people around them encouraging them to do certain things, and obviously, sometimes it's a mistake and sometimes it's not the right move.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess at that time, there's a bit of sentiment around. The main thing that was around was that property prices were way too expensive, and they can't continue to grow like that. Now, that was 25 years ago, and here we are having that same conversation about property prices. So that's something for people to understand, is that that's always a conversation. And that very first apartment I bought, it tripled in value, and I sold it, a little while ago. But people are always looking at where property prices are. They if you're buying in well-located markets, they're going to keep going up. And but for me, I thought things were quite expensive at the time, and that's one of the reasons why I went in and sort of bought a small property. And yeah, some people were yeah, commenting that, oh, geez, you bought a really small place. What'd you do that for? But that's kind of where I bought, and I knew it was a bit of a stepping stone. But I had a few stepping stones because when I moved out of that property and decided to rent it out, I went and bought another home, which is way out in Ingleburn, which is 40 or 50 k's southwest Sydney, and I actually lived there. And I used to do a 2.5 hour commute to work because I was working in the eastern suburbs, and that was quite annoying. Long travel times. But I knew even that was, and again, a lot of people were telling me, "Why do you live way out there? You could just live, sort of close to work." But the problem is, like them, I couldn't afford to buy a home close to work, and but I had a sort of a bit of a strategy where I was having some of these properties as a bit of a stepping stone. So I knew it wouldn't be something I'd be doing forever, but I did have that determination that I'd sort of make things work. So I sort of had my mindset on what I wanted to do, and work at it like that. And then the next property I bought like that was the next one after that, sorry, was in a better location, sort of in the inner west of Sydney, and started growing things like that.
Absolutely. Now, I like the word determination that you keep throwing in there because not a lot of people go past the first property, and very few people then go in and buy maybe the second, third, or whatever you then went on and did. This determination, where would it have been emanating from? Is it from learning, or is it, just something that's inherently a Lloyd Edge thing?
Well, I think we all inherit our strengths and maybe our weaknesses from somewhere, and I'm pretty sure the determination side of things probably came from my parents. My mum was always pretty determined and had a lot of health problems through her life, but succeeded. I mean, she was even told that she couldn't have kids because she had polio when she was a kid, and then she ended up. Although she was never able to be, be an athlete sort of thing. Like she could only sort of walk, wasn't able to run. She was in bed for 2 years with polio, but she was told she'd never had kids, but she succeeded to do that, and then ended up becoming a farmer. So all these things that she's told she couldn't do, she kept persevering to do. My dad fought in the Second World War. I fought there for the entire time, and saw some horrific things while he was there, but lived a nice full life after that. So he had, and he was a business owner as well, so he had a lot of determination. So I think a lot of it probably came from there. But I think for me, I get my mindset on something, and I don't want to give up. I want to just keep going. So and there were mistakes I made during my property. Building my portfolio, which we can go into. But when I made some mistakes, I didn't let that sort of stop me. I just moved on and figured out how I can fix this and how I can put myself into a better position.
Absolutely. And you started looking into other markets, besides Sydney as the hub. When a lot of people are looking to invest, they just want to maybe buy the property that's just down the road for them so that they can look at it and they can, visit it. And just in case something needs to be fixed, they don't have to go far in order to reach out forward. What was the thought process of you having to look into other markets that were far away from you, and you wouldn't know what was happening to that property on the weekend?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things about comes down to research, and even now I get those same conversations, with my clients who just want to buy property close to them because they want to be able to check on it. But in reality, you can't check on a property because legally you can't just go into a property even if it's yours, because if it's been lived in by a tenant, you can only have a maximum of about 4 inspections a year depending on the state that it's in. It needs to be organised through the property manager. I recommend you have a property manager to do it, not you try to manage it yourself, essentially. So for me, I just knew I'd get a property manager to manage the properties, and I was buying properties in Brisbane, but also in regional areas, whether that's in Toowoomba. I bought one in a mining town in central Queensland, which is a funny story in itself. Back in the day, I was buying properties sight unseen, just doing it based on the numbers. That's not something I recommend or advocate these days, but for me, I just had the confidence just to decide, well, this is what I need to do. I've done the research, and this looks like it'll be a good fit to help me towards my longer term goals, which is essentially to put myself in a position where I could retire from the current job that I had.
Absolutely. You see, one of the things that obviously the market is told is to stay clear of any sort of debt and, just pay off whatever debt you have, maybe your principal place of residence, pay that off, and then, start enjoying your life. But it looks like from the little that you were receiving from your teacher's salary, you went on and accumulated more and more debt without,
Mm.
sort of the cash flow. Wasn't there any fear, in you putting yourself in such a leveraged position?
So it's about mitigating that and understanding that you're using your good debt to advance yourself. So I did make one mistake where I bought in a central Queensland mining town because I was attracted to the fact that it had 30% growth in the last 18 months or something, and then it had rental yields of 8 or 9%. So it was like massive amounts of return on it, which was so different to the negatively geared properties I had in Sydney. But when the mining boom ended, that property went from being worth 600,000 to being worth about $150,000 overnight, essentially. And the rent once the mining company that was renting the property when they left town, the rent went from about $800 a week down to about 190 a week. So that was a mistake. And looking at I didn't buy in the right place with the right fundamentals. Essentially, it didn't have all the drivers that I normally, or these days, understand where you need to buy property in terms of, I like to look for 4 or 5 industries of growth, whether it was retail, manufacturing, education, healthcare, and, good solid economy, and looking at, vacancy rates and, jobs growth, and, all those sort of things. So if you do look at all those things, then you can be quite confident, I think, in where you buy. But it's funny with the question you just asked, because when I got to about 3 or 4 properties, I had a lot of my colleagues at work telling me, "Oh, you're not going to buy any more properties, are you? Because you'll go broke, and you go bankrupt." And to me, that didn't make any sense, because I was thinking, but that's actually how I'm going to create wealth, because I'm never going to create wealth if I'm just doing my salaried job. And I was earning about 60 or 70 grand a year as a teacher. And yeah, you can't save your way to wealth, and certainly on a low income, you can't do that. So for me, it was about trying to build, or trying to get assets that would create that future for me. So there was a small level of fear, but I always mitigated it by understanding, okay, how am I leveraging this? How much rent's coming in, and how much savings have I put aside in case there's any issues with the property, or if it does go vacant. Like, although I was always trying to buy in areas that have sort of a vacancy rate of below 2%, if the property does go vacant, how long can I hold it for without any tenants? Making sure that I've got a few thousand put aside for that, and for repairs and things like that. So it's mitigating the risk as much as possible. But for me, I've always worked on the premises that if you have if you're buying property, then it's good debt, and that can create wealth. Having things like car loans and credit cards and things, that's all bad debt. Now, I never had a credit card till I was about 35, because I only bought one because it was getting too hard to book things. Like, I need to book an airfare, and you need credit cards to all that kind of stuff. Because prior to them, I'd never I'd never had a credit card. Throughout my 20s, I never bought a new car. I was driving old cars. Although I had money in the bank that I was saving for property, I wasn't going out and buying those new shiny objects. So I was still driving a really old car that I remember driving an old Ford Laser that lost its brakes going down Bulli Pass into Wollongong one year and stuff like that. So, all these things. But I had, 30, 40 grand in the bank, which could have bought me a new car, but it was my savings for a deposit. So it was really about putting the money to good use, knowing that, in the future I could, own a nice car and own other assets and things like that. Um,
Mm.
the other thing also, I think what you mentioned, Prosper, about people sort of buying a home and then paying it off. If you do that, and that's all you do, then you end up with sort of one asset, but you're also still working, your whole life, and then you retire, and you're not really, you haven't really grown any assets that's allowed you to retire more than whatever your super is paying, or whatever your pension might be. If you got super, it can be quite volatile. So even for me, so I've lived in about four homes, four primary place of residence, and each one was a bit of a stepping stone. I had a one bedroom unit, and then a three bedroom townhouse, then another sort of a little house with a large backyard, and then we moved down and bought our dream home. But I wouldn't have been able to do that on a teacher's salary. And yeah, where we live now, which is sort of a three-story home and a waterfront, is only possible because I had grown my portfolio to the point that it could actually support that. And when I sold some properties and I developed some duplexes and sold those, I could then fund the home that I wanted to do. So that was all part of that strategy. But I could never have done that if I'd just been working a salary. So there's always that bigger picture that I was aiming for.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for walking us through that. Now, Lloyd, you did mention the breakout room stories. Over coffee while you're in between lessons, some teachers were coming to you with all these words of gloom. Oh, the market is like this, or you're never gonna be able to go past that, and things of that nature. Now, some people might also experience that at a barbecue, Auntie Sally, who sits at the corner of the table, who's always ahead of, what the news is saying, what markets are doing, and things of that nature. How do people get past that? And you especially, especially when everyone around you and the media
Hmm.
has all these connotations around, the progress that you are making.
Yeah, so it is tricky. For me, it's just about being really focused on what I wanted to do. I think for a lot of people, it can be a little bit tricky because, they've got a lot of people in their ear. And, for people, you've got, you might be at your Sunday afternoon barbecue and then someone says, yeah, my brother owned a property in that area once and it didn't do very well. So he doesn't do property anymore because you can't do well in property and things. So people have their own stories and their own things that have happened. And I know other people are sort of worried about global affairs and how that's going to affect the economy. But the number one thing that I think people really need to do is really educate themselves and do a lot of research and independent. And if they're going to take advice, then take sort of independent advice and then consider that advice. Don't just take it as gospel. So, and what I mean by that is, someone's trying to sell you a property, then they're going to put a good story to go with it. So and make everything sound like everything's really rosy and good. So don't necessarily believe that. Maybe go to an independent advisor, get some real good advice on on what's happening in the markets, and just do a lot of reading and making sure you understand what it is you want to do and how you can mitigate that risk. And for some people, that might be buying in a particular market but not in another. So for me, I'm comfortable in both capital cities and regional country markets. Other people aren't so comfortable in regional markets because they worry that they're a bit more volatile or they don't get as much growth, so they could stick to maybe a capital city market, for example. But then we've also seen that they're quite volatile. Melbourne's been a bit like that the last couple of years. We've seen Perth do that. So you really need to understand the driving forces and the economics behind everything, so you can make those decisions moving forward. But that's much better than just listening to people, get in your ear and say, "Oh, don't do this because it's a bad idea," or my dad says, "Don't do this." You really need to make that decision yourself, and that's what I always did was just did the research and then had belief that I was confident what I was doing, and I just owned what I did. And if I made a mistake, then I owned that mistake. But if I had success, then I had the grit and determination to go ahead and create that success.
Absolutely. And I like how obviously through all of this, you also went on and really started looking at how can I teach others, to be proficient in property as you were learning, you know what I mean? And things of that nature. But teaching and property seem like worlds apart. What sort of lessons from your teaching days still guide you in your today's day-to-day negotiations and actually property discussions with other people?
Yeah, so it's not as far apart as you'd think because I do think I've combined my two passions really. So education and property. Now, property is, some people might think I'm passionate about property. I'm not really passionate about property. I'm passionate about it as a vehicle to achieve your financial independence. And that's really important because, I don't walk into a property and think the property is beautiful unless I'm planning to buy a home and I, want to live in a beautiful home. But as an investment, it's really about the numbers. Does this suit my investment strategy? and that's the vehicle. So that's what's important. Now, the education component for me is that, like, when I work with people through the business, it's not just about people come to me and they say, oh, they want an investment property, and then I say, yep, we'll go find you one. I sit down with them and try to understand what they're trying to achieve over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And that often involves conversations with their other advisors as well, because I believe people should have a good team around them. I call it the dream team. But if you've got a financial advisor and an accountant and a mortgage broker, and then your buyer's agent, we're all sitting around trying to understand what you're doing for the long term. And then from a properties perspective, I can then talk to people about the right sort of property strategies that might work for you, and what areas are going to get growth, the difference between a high growth and a high yield property, and how you might be going for high growth, but if you go for high growth, you might have a low yield, and that may not suit your strategy because you just come to me saying you want positive cash flow. So it's just sort of educate people on everything there too. So it's really understanding what people are trying to achieve and trying to find a property that's actually going to help them achieve that, and then set them up with a full investment strategy. So a lot of teaching and education actually goes into that to help people understand the whole fundamentals of property.
Absolutely. Now, Lloyd, I mean, somebody might then start looking at, you know, where you are and the journey that you have taken, and start thinking buyers agents are maybe only for the wealthy. I don't think I can afford having somebody like that working with me and things of that nature. To what would you say to such myth, or how can you dispel it?
Well, I guess the first thing I say to that is, like, there is a cost to using a buyer's agent, and I'm very well aware of that. But one of the things also is that I think going back 25 or 30 years, buyer's agents were considered to be for the wealthy, where these days there's so many more transactions done through buyer's agents, and at a much like, at lower price points. So you're not talking about buying multi-million-dollar properties. I mean, you might be going and buying a 500K or 600K regional property, and you can use a buyer's agent, and they'll charge a fee accordingly. But one other thing about using a buyer's agent, particularly getting the right sort of buyer's agent that's good for you, is the amount of research that they'll do on the area and the property that you're buying. So for us, we'll be setting that strategy, like I said, helping them understand how they're going to achieve what they want to achieve, and start mapping out that strategy, which is something that we then keep working with them on for years. I mean, I've got some clients that I've been working with for 10 years that are still our clients, and we still continue to sort of evolve their strategy. But then we also then educate them on the market. So if it's determined that we're going to buy in some suburbs of Brisbane, for example, then our research team here will prepare research profiles on those markets, and why we should invest in them, what infrastructure is going in there from the government, what are the job prospects, the population growth, and all that. So you're getting educated from that perspective. And then when it comes down to buying the actual property, that's where I think people really do need that help. Not only does it take a lot of time, and it gives your time back, because people can be, trying to look at property every night, and then on weekends they're going to be trying to, look through property, and people are usually too busy to do that when they're working full time, and then they've probably got a family, got kids to look after on the weekend as well. So a buyer's agent can do that. But the other thing also is that finding a well-located property, something that makes investment grade. So for me, the first thing we ever check is to make sure there's not in a flood zone. We don't want to buy under a flight path. Buying in a nice quiet street, in the catchment zone of really good local schools, good street appeal, good floor plans are really important. Being close to all the amenities, looking at how far the property is from those amenities, making sure it's near bus stops and train lines, although not too close that is noisy. So really getting a quality property there is something that a lot of people will struggle with, and where buyers actually really come in handy. But the other thing also is often we can save our fee or more than our fee in what we can negotiate off the property. Now that's not all the time, but whatever the case is, it's all about providing you value, every step of the way. And of course, buyers agents do also have access to properties that are not listed online as well. So there might be off-market and pre-market properties. So there's different ways that buyers agents can help, definitely. But I think the first thing is just having a chat, reaching out to a buyer's agent, having a chat to seeing if that is right for you, and whether you can get some benefit from it.
Absolutely. I was actually reading in your book, in the section where it says location, 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 and one of your strategies says, if possible, when I'm considering a property for myself or my clients, I actually sit outside at different times of the day to do reconnaissance. It's good to know, for example, which way the sun comes into the property living areas and which parts face north and get the full sun. So obviously, if somebody's doing this by themselves, they wouldn't have the time to.
That's right. Yeah. So that's one thing. So you obviously work out which way a property is facing and which way the sun's supposed to come in at that time of the day. But actually being there and visualizing that is really important because if the lounge room's at the front of the property and the sun's coming right in directly at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when the family's going to be at home watching TV or having dinner, that could be really annoying. And they might need to have the curtains closed and they may not want the curtains closed. So that's one thing. The other thing also is to really know that street and have that local knowledge. And that's why, with my team, I've got sort of local knowledge experts like buyers agents who are local in wherever we buy, whether it's Brisbane, Melbourne, Adelaide, Sydney, so on, because you don't want to be buying, you really need to understand that street appeal. You don't want to be buying in a street where we find that someone else is like growing a drug lab in the same street or that sort of thing. So really understanding that you're buying into a really nice street. It's predominantly owner occupied. I like to try to buy in areas that have about 75 to 80% owner occupied ratio because that means that the area is full of more house-proud people. That generally drives the growth because although you're buying an investment property, you want to be able to sell that in the future to a homeowner who's going to be a bit more emotional and pay more for that property in the future. And of course, buying in areas that have really low vacancy rates, 1 or 2% at the most is really important as well. And keeping away from the lower socioeconomic areas, you don't want to buy where there's housing commission or where there's too many renters. That's why I like that ratio of owner occupiers, because if you buy in an area where there's 50 or 60% renters, then most of the properties are investment properties. So there's not going to be as much growth for your property in that area. So there's a lot of things that we look at that the general public wouldn't look for when they're buying a property.
Absolutely. I mean, there are some streets where during the day it's nice and calm because everybody's at work. And when everybody comes back home, the whole street is there's no parking, it's too noisy, and it's just all chaos. And sometimes that must be a deterrent. So now I can see what you're talking about. Now, let's just get into your strategy a little bit, because what you help people with is positively geared investments. And I mean, obviously, from the outside, so many people don't think properties like that even exist, or a method like that is even sustainable in the long run. Could you maybe walk us through what that actually means in real terms and how you come, to then pinpoint that, this is a property that will be positively geared from day one?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess the first thing for people to understand, like right at the very moment, it is harder to get positively geared properties because of where the interest rates are, but they're starting to come back down. So that's a positive thing. But in terms of strategies, that's one of the reasons why we look at like regional areas where the yields are higher, but also dual income properties. Because if you buy a dual income property, so that might be a house with a granny flat or like a duplex, and you buy sort of both units of the duplex, then that's a property that will be much easier to be positively geared. But also something that I also love doing is buying a property that's a little bit run down, doing a bit of a cosmetic renovation in it, and that not only adds value to the property, but it might considerably increase the rental return. So you might buy a property that looks a little bit negative to start with, but if you then do that renovation, that turns it into positively geared. So there are strategies around how to do that, even if the market's a little bit tough. But the main thing that I think people also need to understand is that it's about having a positively geared property portfolio at the end of it as well. It's not about buying every property positively geared, because that doesn't necessarily suit everyone's strategy. And for some people, if they're on high incomes and they want to get some tax deductions, they might buy in a capital city where the yields are lower. It'll be negatively geared, so that'll be more more, more of a strategy for negative gearing there. However, like any property, it's possible to buy positively geared if you put down a high enough deposit. So you could buy a property in a capital city where the yields are low, but put down 30 or 40% deposit, then it's going to be positively geared anyway. So there are ways around that anyway. I think the where people will find it difficult to get positively gearing if they're wanting to use 100% of borrowed funds and then be positively geared. So that's where it becomes very tricky. So becomes part of the education component about how does that work? How does it not work? What areas should we be focusing on to get the best results on that? Because at the end of the day, it's also not the rental yield that makes you wealthy. It's actually the capital growth in the properties. So we do need to buy where there is capital growth on the properties, because you want to have a property where 10 years down the track, you might want to sell it, and it's actually grows significantly in value. If you get a property and it's grown in value, it's got 7% annual growth compounding over 10 years, that should be enough for the property to double in value. You don't want to buy a property that basically gets no growth and in 10 years' time it's worth no more than you bought it for. Even if it's been positively geared, if it's got no growth, it hasn't really served much of a purpose for you. So that's all about strategy, and they're the conversations that I take people through as well.
Now, Lloyd, I mean, obviously, if somebody's listening to this right now, it's like, okay, right. So Lloyd was an economist, and a lot of economists are the ones that win Nobel Prizes. And you were a teacher. Obviously, music is usually one of those hardest subjects that really require concentration and things of that nature. And you excelled in that field as well. And now you're excelling, as a buyer's agent, helping other people with your portfolio and experience and things of that nature. And somebody's just looking at that and thinking, I can't be like that. Does this actually work on real humans, or anybody else who is just really thinking of maybe this could be the way for me? Or do I really need to be a certified economist, or maybe have a 10, 15 years experience as a teacher and get the qualifications that you now have?
No, so you definitely don't need to have all of that qualifications and experience, but you do need to have some advisors. That's where people they can't really go it alone without any advice. Like, you really do need to have a mortgage broker who understands what you're trying to achieve long term. You need to have like an accountant who can help set you up with the right structures and give you advice on whether you should be buying in trusts or company structures or personal names, and how to split all that and everything like that. And then I think a property advisor who can help with that. But what's important is that you sort of enjoy the journey. The journey is just as much a part of it as the destination, because if you're looking to replace your income and to buy multiple properties to do that, it's not going to happen in 1 or 2 years. Sometimes people come along and they buy one or two properties and they think that that's going to be their answer to retiring from work. But it is persistence. So you need to be prepared to work at it, work hard. Someone else will essentially be doing the work, but you've got to be persistent and realize it might be a 10 or a 15-year journey to do it. But for most people, that is quite possible, as long as you do need to have income in the first place. So coming along and having already quit your job and then decide you want to buy lots of properties doesn't actually work, because one of the things I did as a teacher was utilized my income as serviceability. And even on the days that I wasn't enjoying my work so much, wasn't that happy at work, I did remind myself that I've got serviceability because I have a job, and I was using that borrowing power was allowing me to buy properties which would be helping me achieve those end goals. So that's really important. But generally, yeah, look, definitely people can achieve these things and don't need to be anything flash or anything like that. Because I wasn't anything flash. I might have been a reasonable musician and all that kind of stuff, but I also had quite a low income. So I work with a lot of people with much higher incomes than what I had at the time, but I also work with people that have the lower income. So I kind of work with anyone, but certainly, yeah, I didn't have a high starting base to get to where I got to, though.
Absolutely. And I think through that, you were sort of describing the kind of people that you want to work with. But if somebody's watching this right now, what do they need to put together, and how can they get a hold of you?
Well, they don't really need to put much together. I mean, what I do advise people is to probably have a chat to their bank or their mortgage broker before they, just so we understand their borrowing capacity. If they haven't, they can still reach out, and then but that'll probably be the first question that they get asked by my admin team, and then we can help. You know, if you don't have a mortgage broker, we can help advise you on that. But our company phone number is 1-800-146-837. The website's auspropertyprofessionals.com.au, so people can reach out and make an inquiry there, or send an email direct to admin@auspropertyprofessionals.com.au. But I think the first thing to realize is that the initial discovery call is completely free, no obligation. So, and that gets back to what I was saying before. People may not know whether using a buyer's agent is right for them or not, but reach out and just have a chat, and find out. And that's the main thing, because sometimes I'll even be talking to someone and then realize that they may not be the right fit for us, depending on what they really want, what their requirements are, and for me, it's about managing people's expectations as well. So we need to work and gel together as a team. But yeah, I would recommend that people just reach out and organize a chat with me, and we can find out what they really wanted to do and how we might be able to help.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes below so that people can obviously get started. Now, Lloyd, you introduced us to the music teacher, the man who was determined, no matter what was being thrown at him, in the break rooms where people were telling you you're going to get bankrupt, but you just kept being determined and things of that nature. And you obviously kept going on, and now you are the one that is speaking in front of the audience and sending people down the elevator on how you actually managed to do that. Now, if we would ask that school teaching Lloyd of 2003 in the back room, what is it that you want, how would he answer, and how does that sort of align with what you're doing now?
Well, the thing is that if you asked me that back in 2003, I would have said I don't really know what I want, because I have made it clear. And when I wrote Positively Geared and talked about my story, I did make it clear that I didn't know what I was doing and had no strategy at the time. If you asked me in about 2008, then I definitely knew what I wanted then. So, and by then I had quite a few properties, but that's when I kind of set myself the goal and said, okay, in the next 4 or 5 years, I intend to retire through property. But yeah, look, when I first started, like the first thing I did was bought a small one-bedroom apartment and lived in. That's something I would never recommend for anyone to do. If you're on a small budget, I wouldn't recommend you to be buying a home to live in to start with. That can really stop you in your tracks right away. I'd recommend that you rent best, essentially, which is a term that's used a lot these days, but it basically means you can rent a property where you want to live. If you want to live in a really nice location to you, and close to work, do that, and then buy an investment property that makes sense in another location that is more affordable for you, and get in the property ladder that way. That's something that I didn't do at the time, and I probably should have in some ways, but certainly something that I recommend these days.
Absolutely. Now, Lloyd, I've read your books. I've known you as a person. I've listened to some of your work in form of a podcast. You have won awards. You're helping other people also. Be, do, and have that sort of happier existence. And from what you mentioned, you're now living in your dream home. What's next? What is the challenge or milestone that you're chasing now that we can actually be excited for and root for you as you
Yeah,
move?
so one of the most exciting things for me actually is trying to help people that are less fortunate than myself. For me, and one of the things I did outline in my book was my goal is to be able to help people or kids, particularly in third world countries, like places like Kenya and even Nepal. And I kind of developed that when I spent a bit of time, because I went and I climbed Mount Everest base camp, and then the following year I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Spent a bit of time in the local the local communities there, got to, see the kids and see how happy they were despite the fact they had nothing. But I've always had a bit of interest in being able to sort of, help with some educational funding, to help build some classrooms and things like that. So that is something that, and I'm actually, sort of working on that process a bit at the moment. And the other thing that I've done quite recently, which I got really inspired, I actually went and spent a week on Necker Island, which is Sir Richard Branson's island, essentially. But I basically spent a fair bit of time with him and a few other CEOs from around the world, and came back very inspired there to help some other organizations. So one of the things that we'll also be doing through Aus Property Professionals is becoming involved with Virgin Unite, which is Sir Richard's not-for-profit organization, which is essentially does something similar to what I outlined before, helping people in less fortunate situations. So that's something where I think for me, as you grow a business, it's not just about how much money do you need. It's not about me making money. It's about what I can do for the greater good. So that's one aspect. And the other thing also is the real core to why I do things, and that's just making sure that my family and my kids and stuff are set up, and they're pretty set up now. But for me, I've got young kids only just sort of starting school. Essentially, and so I've been able to make sure that they're secure and everything's covered for them, and they've got a good grounding, for the future is important. And one of my goals there is to get back into the school system, you're not as a full-time teacher, but to just sort of get in there and help with some financial literacy, because that's something that's not really taught really in schools. So I every now and again I do get asked to go into a high school and give a presentation on my journey. All the kids receive a copy of my books and all that kind of stuff. But it's really about people understanding, or the kids understanding how you can get ahead through property, understanding what a bit more about financial education and things like that. So that's something that I'm quite passionate about, and as I grow the business, it's freeing up some time for me to be able to do things like that. So there's some of the bigger things that I'm really passionate about moving forward. And in terms of the business as I grow it, when I initially started it was just me. I've now grown to a staff of about 20 people, and I've got people on the ground in, as well as Sydney. We're in Melbourne, Brisbane, and Adelaide now as well. So we've got that national presence as well, which is very handy for being able to sort of buy properties across multiple locations as we grow the business, to be able to help do with these other goals that I've got in mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Lloyd, I can't thank you enough for the time that you have spent with us. I mean, your life story and your experience really is that music sheet that somebody can actually read and put out their own symphony by putting together the instruments that you have shared with us. I mean, so many people just go through life and have nothing to show for it, but you, sir, have literally lived, learned, and contributed. You've lived the life that everybody wants to live. You've actually learned how to do that and how to get there, and now you're sending down the elevator in terms of contribution and things of that nature. So I can't wait to be a part of the next journey and everything else that you're working on, sir.
No, thanks so much, Prosper. And it's I've really enjoyed talking with you today, and hope your listeners have got something out of it. And like I said, just reach out for a chat if you want. There's no harm in that, and see where it takes you.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are watching, that was Lloyd Edge, from trombones in schools to multi-million-dollar portfolios. And I think if today's episode really lit you up or lit up a bit of spark in you, I encourage you to subscribe so you don't miss the next shows where we dive into ideas that will actually help you live a happier and more fulfilled life. And also maybe share this episode with somebody who's really ready to take charge of their own financial future. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter who you are. If you've got the right team and the right information behind you, you too can be, do, and have the life that you love, because prosperity shared is prosperity multiplied. I can't wait to see what you're going to do with this information. Bye for now.